Antony Blinken's first trip to the Middle East as Secretary of State came just days after a fragile ceasefire in Gaza, where an Israeli offensive in response to deadly Hamas rocket attacks left scores dead and buildings in rubble. The focus of Blinken's talks this week with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, how the US can shore up the Egypt-brokered ceasefire and help rebuild Gaza.
We know that to prevent a return to violence, we have to use the space created to address a larger set of underlying issues and challenges. And that begins with tackling the grave humanitarian situation in Gaza and starting to rebuild.
The US commitment to rehabilitate Gaza raises the question of how to get aid into civilians without it going to Hamas, the US-designated terror group that controls the Palestinian territory.
We'll work with our partners, closely with all, to ensure that Hamas does not benefit from the reconstruction assistance.
US officials suggest involving the United Nations and the Palestinian Authority to circumvent Hamas. Some Israeli observers are sceptical.
I don't see the mechanism that would allow America to go around Hamas or over their heads via the Palestinian Authority.
Pincus says that before the latest hostilities, Qatar was sending $30 million a month in cash into Gaza via an Israeli border crossing. Israeli defense officials are calling for that to end.
This has been the recommendation of the military, of the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, to the Prime Minister for some time, to cut the direct link that the Qataris have with Hamas in terms of providing them the money, and to make them stop and go through some kind of a filtering process.
During his trip, Blinken said he would request $75 million from Congress for economic assistance to the Palestinian people. The Palestinian Authority greeted this pledge as a welcome start at rebuilding relations. These reached a historic low under the Trump administration, which moved the US Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem and cut funding to UN agencies supporting Palestinians. On the Israeli side, the latest hostilities in Gaza are prompting a reassessment of Israel's policy towards Hamas.
Israel's policy in the last few years was to weaken the Palestinian Authority, to divide and rule the Palestinians between the West Bank and Gaza, and indirectly strengthen or at least maintain Hamas's power in order to prevent any meaningful peace process. I'm not saying that one could have been held, but at least to prevent it from ever happening.
As the US tries to reset relations with the Palestinian leadership, Secretary Blinken continues his efforts to turn a shaky Gaza ceasefire into a more stable truce. Iris Makler for VOA News, Jerusalem.